Okay, so again, I'll record this. I'll share it as soon as we finish this demonstration, the best thing to do after this is to go through it yourselves and recreate it. And that's that'll probably take you today to have a look and then note down things and go explore. So that's going to be useful time spent by yourselves. So I'm going to try and demonstrate this and talk about things as I go. Questions, keep them to the end as well. Or put them, maybe let's make a little board. Let's put a, if you want to write any questions, this is your board. All right. Any questions, go on the left. Okay, so what am I trying to do? Let's have a look. So I want something very simple, and I want to have a way to display hi, and then maybe the cohort name, and then I want to have an input field that says like what's your name? And it will have an input field, and it will have a button. This is where you put your name, and this is where you click. Click, type. When I click that button, it's going to take me to this page that says something like, your name is Edward. Yay. Just because I need to make sure I know what my name is, yeah? This is, and I'm going to add a little bit more information here. I want to have this as my index. That's going to be a string with a / to denote the index of my application. And then the URL for this, I want to be /name. And I'm going to use, and I'll talk about this in a second, I want to use a post request to send data across to this URL, and I want it to be name, and then clearly in this example it's going to be Edward. So this is what I'm going to try and build, and I'm going to start for an entirely new application, and we're going to build it from scratch. A couple of things that we should talk about. One is the way that we were doing this before is if we think about another version of this, zoom out and put it over here. And another version of this, if I think about a different color, yeah. You'll see this diagram a lot, right? And this is one way to represent a typical client-server relationship. Now, when we've been dealing with front-end stuff the past couple of weeks, we haven't been dealing with this side here. We've only been doing programming here using JavaScript. So this is front-end, and this would be what we call back-end. That's what? That's not how you spell that. Now these terms, front end and back end, aren't as discrete as they used to be, but they're still quite useful because people understand instinctively what they mean. So front end is no longer really just front end anymore. It reaches across, and the same with back end stuff. Regardless, we've been dealing with JavaScript in the browser, and the browser is a special kind of client. You've been using clients from your command line. You've been making requests using curl, for example. and you might have found different ways as well. But a client-server relationship is something that can send a request, and a server is something that can interpret that request and send back a response. So if we, now that we're moving on to server side, we can get rid of the green, and we can think about what we're going to have to do. So our browser is still going to make requests, but rather than use events to trigger actions. So before we were triggering JavaScript to happen when you clicked on a button or you loaded the page. For example, when React loaded the page, when the React components rendered, you then triggered an event of one of the lifecycle methods to then do something. Here in this kind of application, we're going to use HTTP requests to trigger events. So when you make a request, we can make an initial request to get information. And so a typical request over here would be a GET request to get just the index. And in this case, I'm going to use a POST request using a form to submit data. So any data in my input field, I want to.
Ed, I can't see what you're drawing.
Thank you. Just jumped in and ruined my flow. What was I talking about?
GET request.
Cool. No, absolutely. Please just shout out if you can't see what I'm doing. And that probably is too. Can you still see that if I leave it like that? Just about. Okay. I don't want you to worry too much in the moment about exactly what a GET request is and a POST request, because we're going to visualize this tomorrow morning. All right, we're going to dive in and have a look at this. The high level view at the moment is a GET request. I just want to read back data, and POST is when I want to change the state of my application. We'll do a lot of this tomorrow morning, and then we'll think more deeply about HTTP verbs and things like that over the next few weeks. Okay, so what I was talking about the difference. So before in front end, we were using events, clicking buttons, loading the page, and things like that to trigger behavior. Whereas as we move on to web applications, for the moment, I want you to think about HTTP requests as being our event triggers. When you create a request, then your server can handle it and give you back a response. So on this diagram, there's an important part of this that we're going to use to describe it as a controller. Now, you'll have lots of controllers, but if you think about the responsibility of a controller is to say, look at the request and decide what to do. So here, I've already told you I've got at least two kinds of requests. I've got a request for the index, and I've got a POST request at /name. So in this two different requests, I need to have something that says, okay, look at the request and decide what to do. Is it a GET? Is it a POST? Is it a does it not? Is it? Let me undo that. What is the URL? Those are the two main things that we ask from a request, or the controller needs to ask to decide what to do. The other one is like, is there any, maybe what is better, is there any data in the request that we need to use? So controller is going to listen to the request, and then it's going to execute different bits of logic. Right, in the same way that you had in your sort of front-end apps, like a file if you think back to a thermostat, you had like an interface file that said, if I clicked on this button, do this thing, or if I click on that one, do this thing. Essentially, it was acting like some kind of controller. If you think back to maybe the bitmap editor, when you had that loop running that was listening to input, saying if you did this command, execute this this bit of logic. So the pattern is quite common in different kinds of applications. It's some kind of a layer or some kind of controller that does things depending on a scenario. The controller is responsible for listening to requests and also sending back the response. And this line should be over here. Listens to requests, sends back responses. Now, we need to also think about what is the response, and there's going to be a responsibility here. I'm going to put for some reason this way, and I'm going to call it views. So this is going to be where we hold all of the text or the responsibility for what does the page look like. So before, when we were doing React, we were doing what we call client-side rendering. As you might imagine, client-side rendering. This is when we are showing the user what they need to see, or the logic for deciding and creating that view in the client, using JavaScript, for example. Whereas we're going to move on, not really move on, but we're going to explore server-side rendering. So the logic for deciding what the user sees is going to be on the server before we send it back to the client using the response. So there's going to be some responsibility here for the views. And then lastly is that if there's any important logic that we need to do, we'll create some kind of a class, and we'll call it a model. So you might have many models. Models represent logic, bits of domain logic. So if you think to the rock, paper, scissors challenge that we're doing this week, or the end of this week, you might want to model your application using a game class, for example. And that would be a model that you would have, some kind of game class. You might choose a few different ways. A game is quite a common approach, but it's not necessarily the best approach. Okay, so these three parts, or these three responsibilities for your web application are what you might here refer to as MVC, Model View Controller. So the client's quite dumb in this request. We just send requests, HTTP requests, and the server does most of the work, send us back HTML in this example. So if this is the request, this is the response, and these are again the format, or the kind of things that are happening in the request response is all just text according to an agreed format. And we'll look at that agreed format tomorrow morning. In the response, we just need to send back some text in HTML format so that the browser can see it, or the browser can render it. And usually, and this is in the body of the request, and sorry, in the body of the response, we also need to usually say what kind of outcome the request was. And there's usually three parts, and there's usually some kind of metadata. Oh, it's going off the bottom there.
What are the pros and cons of using like server-side rendering as opposed to client-side?
Yeah, great question. Hold that, or put that over here onto this one. This is the place for questions, right? And a really great question. So I want to come back to that. So what we're going to be doing is trying to think about a web application that is organized according to the MVC pattern using models, views, and controllers. And I've sort of described a little bit about the responsibility for these three different things. The controller is listening to requests and deciding what to do with them and sending back the response back to the client. And it needs data, or it pulls in information as needed from the views and from models to do work. Views to compile the text needed to send back in the response, and models to execute any business logic. And then we send that back to the client. So if I think about my simple interaction, my model here, this is what I want to see on the page after I make my GET request. I want to see this text on the page with an input field and a submit button. And then when I click it, I want to see this on the page. Your name is Edward. Okay, so let's begin. So the process I'm going to do is probably going to do a bunch of looking things up. I'm going to try and sort of force myself to look things up, even if I know them, and just like work slowly. But the first thing I want to do is clearly set up my Cypress test, and we're going to be using Cypress to test drive this from a feature point of view. So quite common setting up a Cypress test is it should be nice and straightforward. So is it here? Cool. So absolutely empty directory. Yay. So first things first, let's initialize our project as a node project, and a demo of setting up a web, let's call it an Express project. No. Can't be bothered. No. Me. Yes. Okay, and then I am going to install some dependencies. Say dev. I want Cypress, and there's going to be a few more I know I'm going to have to add, but if I just do Cypress and Express for now, and let's just do this for now. Cool. So you can see I've all installed. Let's add a and let's make sure that's all hidden. Or what else do I need to do? Let's open up Cypress and wait for its chop chop. There you are. Not you, you. I'm just going to get rid of you for the moment. I probably get rid of you. Probably get rid of all of you for the moment. I don't think I need anything. Just goodbye. I don't need you either. Not making any API requests. So we just have an integration folder. That's fine. And I'm going to give it a file name web demo spec.js. And let's set this up. Describe web demo. What's a good name for my application? I don't know yet. Name teller. Okay, it shows a lovely greeting. Okay, so here we do our classic visit the index page, and I want to assert that it contains clearly in lowercase. All right, fine. MSE 2103A exclamation mark, and also what's your name? And let's start there. I'll make an assertion later on the input field. Let's just make sure we can get that running. So if I'm using Cypress, I need to make sure I add my base URL here. And it's going to be something like HTTP host, I guess 3000. Let's make sure it's 3000. All right. Okay, so you just generate again. Fine. That was nothing that I did. Okay, so I've set that up. I'm going to see this fail. It's going to be something like it's not running. I'm not running my application because I haven't created one yet, but let's see it fail. As you can see here, it cannot verify that the server is running. Good. Okay, so that's my failing test for the moment. And now let's have a look at the Express docs. Express. Let's go to getting started. Oh, no, not you. That's something that's one of my pet peeves. Things that load and then change the place on the page. That's always really irritating. Okay, next, please. Here. All right. So I'll send this into the co-op channel. Below is the simplest Express app you can create. It's a single file, not what you get if you use the Express generator. We're not using the Express generator. We're going to do it ourselves. So I'm going to take all of this. And I'm going to create a file called app.js. I'm going to put that here. I require that the module Express. I then invoke Express and store it in this variable, and then I have a variable for my port. And then there's this two functions: get at the index and listen. So this is a way to write a handler, a root handler. So if we go back to my diagram here, if I look at the controller part, I need to get information about what kind of request is it, what is it get, is it a post, what's the URL, and this is essentially a way I can decide. It says if I get any requests according to the index, add a get request, then do this bit of logic. But there's one more thing that I want to do before. I don't want to use send because I want to be able to not store view logic in my controller. All right, so I want to store this outside. So as a result, I want to use a kind of file called embedded JavaScript. So let's have a look at an example. Express EJS. EJS is embedded JavaScript. And let's have a look at you. Let's look at you using template engines. That's the Express documentation. You will be good. I want EJS. So a template engine, I guess, is a good thing to talk about. Is a module, another module that we're going to install that allows us to keep our responsibilities separate according to this pattern here: controllers, models, and views. Well, I'm going to do it and then we can talk about it. Where was I? This one, using template engines. So I want, this is giving me an example, but I don't want, to views the directory with the template files, e.g. app set views. This is what I want to do, but I need to actually install the package as well. So I'm going to make sure I have a views folder. And it says set views to be in the views folder. That feels good. But I also want then create a root. It's not going to be this kind of file. I want a slightly different one. So I want to be able to say as you to render and then the index. Okay. So let's take that instead. No, that's, I just want to get this one. There you are. So I want to say render the index, but with, I'm not going to worry about this for the moment. I want to render the index and I'm going to create an index HTML file. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So I'm going to say render this file. Because I don't want to keep any view logic here. I just want to use a template engine to do this for me. And I'll add in the template engine in a second. So what I want to see on my index page, I want to see, where is it? Where is it? There you are. I want to see, let's give it a good old heading 1. Hi, MSE 2103A. Let's just stay there for a moment. So that's what I want to see. And my app needs to be able to listen to any request at the index root and then render the index.html. Okay, let's get my app up and running. So I'm going to open up another shell, and I'm going to see what happens when I run my app. So I'm just using Node and then my app runner, app.js, to run my application. So when I use Node to run it, it runs these 13 lines and then logs out a line saying that it's listening at that port. Okay, so that's my app up and running, but then I need to say, okay, what happens when I navigate in my browser to the index? Let's have a look. So let's go to localhost 3000, and I'll get this error message, render index.html. So let's go ahead and fix that. What I'm going to do is install embedded JavaScript. So if I go back to one of these, I need to install another and then set the view engine to AJS. Okay, so let's make sure I install it. Need a third one. npm install embedded JavaScript. There's going to be a few extra modules we need to install. And I want to make sure I use it. Oh, cancel. And it's telling me I want 2 pages. Why? Oh, because it's putting everything into pages and I guess I could do that. I guess I don't think I need to, but I like where that's headed. So I'm going to put that into there. And I'm going to they give them EJS. Let's also follow their convention. I kind of don't want to, but let's follow their convention. I'm going to rename it to an embedded JavaScript format. And they are saying we get it from pages index like this. Pages index, cool. Okay, let's have a look. Now, we've been so used to React for the past week and doing a lot of hot reloading that any changes that we make, we actually have to kill our server and restart it to make sure the newest version of our files are being loaded into our on a local server. All right. So we'll just have to do a lot of that. So now when I refresh the page, I can see it here, my content. And if we go back to this client server relationship, what's just happened is my browser is on the left and it said, made a GET request to my local server that my controllers responded with, pulled out some information from my views, and then sent back a response that my browser's then rendered. So we've done one full cycle. A request, my servers listened to the request and then sent back a response. We've done it by adding a route handler listening for GET requests at the index. And it sends back a response, and it sends back a response and it finds what it needs to at pages.index here. So that's one request response cycle so far, but let's double check now our Cypress test because we should be slightly further. So let's see. Cool. So this one looks like it's passed, but this one hasn't. Cool. So let's now add that in. What's your name? Okay, so far still test driven. Web demo spec. What's your name? And let us go to here. Let's add in a paragraph rather than a heading and say, what's your name? And refresh. Cool. All right. So on my sort of web application at the moment, I have that text. So let's add in another test. That says something like can shows an input field, an input field and button. Okay, so I visit those two pages. I've already made that assertion, that's fine. If I'm targeting the page, I guess I need to add some IDs. So what should I call them? I'll call it name text box, great. And then I'm going to type into it good. And then I want to get the sort of submit button. There you are. And then I'm going to click the button. So again, I'm trying to imagine what's happening on the page using this as my sort of model. I'm going to type into this field, click the button, and then I'm going to make an assertion on this page. So I want to say something like it contains your name is Edward. What a lovely assertion. I also want to make an assertion on the fact that we're at the right page /name. So I think I can do something like URL. Is it something like this? Should I can't remember this. Cypress URL contains something like that. Cool. All right. Should include /name. All right. Let's try that. So that's going to be my next feature test, trying to replicate the interaction of adding sort of text into a text field, submitting it, and then making sure that my new page has the right content and that we're at the right place. So let's see that test fail. Get name text box. Never found it. Fine. And so let's go add it in. I'm going to keep this as is at the moment, and then I just want to go to my index page. What was that? Oh, that's the introduction starting. Look at that. We're ahead of time, folks. Okay, so here I'm going to use a form. And forms are the basic way and the most common way at the moment that we will make requests from a browser. So this will be quite common to everyone by the end of this week. I am going to specify the action. The action is where I want it to go. So I want it to go to a /name. That's where I want my request to go. I'm going to go back to my models to double check what I want to happen. So if I go back to this model here, from my browser, I want to make requests. So one way you can do it is by manually typing into a URL, your address bar up here, to make a request. All right. But within the page, you can add a form that makes requests as well. And the form can make post requests. You can't make a post request from your browser up here. This only makes get requests up in your URL bar up here. In order to make a post request, you have to do it from some kind of HTML element in your browser, or use JavaScript. And you've been using JavaScript using either jQuery or Fetch to make those kinds of requests. You can still do that in web applications, absolutely, to enrich the experience, but we're just going to focus on using forms for the next week or two. So we're going to add a form in to be able to make a request and post some data to our server. So let's have a look. I'm going to make a request to the /name, making it a post request, and I want an input field. I don't need any starting values. Now the name attribute here is important. This is this will end up being part of the data that gets sent across in the request. So I'm going to give it that's going to be quite confusing, but let's leave it at that because that's what it represents. Input, this is going to be my submit button. And this will be something like submit. Okay, so I need to add some IDs now because I need to be able to target them in my Cypress test. So this is going to be an ID. What did I describe it as? This was name text box, I think. And I think the one below it was something like submit. So I'm going to send across some data in my request. Let's double check where I am at in my Cypress test. Cool. So let's just watch that again. You can see it runs through, adds in, and then submits it, but it fails on the assertion. It tries to find the assertion. Your name is Edward, but never did because I haven't written it yet. But here gives us a clue what we need to now do. It cannot post to name because I don't have that root handler. So once I've added this information here on my browser side, I can now go to my controller and add in another root handler. So this time it's going to be a post request and it's going to be to /name. All right, so this is what we need to do. And then I'm going to add in my request and response. And what do I want to do? Well, I want to be able to render a new HTML page. So we go pages, and let's call this name, I guess. And so let's add in a file here called name.ejs. So I'm going to listen to any post request to /name, and I want to be able to render a new page. And what do I want to see on the page? Well, according to my test, it was your name is Edward. So let's go HTML, and let's use a h1 element, and your name is, and then there's going to have to be something here. We'll have a look at where that comes from in a second. So let's refresh, and it still can't post a name, so we'll have to look at that in a second. So what we're doing here is setting up a post request to /name using request and response, and then rendering this page name. Now, you have to remember that your app needs to reload. So every time you change it, you have to make sure you reload. Now, I've added in this root handler here. So every time you change this file, you have to make sure we reload. There'll be a package that we can download to make our lives easier, but for the moment, I just want you to get into the habit of knowing that any changes you make, you need to be able to reload your app. All right, so let's have a look at it. Refresh the page. You can now see this information here. This is our current index page. And you go something like Edward, submit, and then we get to a new page. All right, we're at /name, and we see the text in here. But we need to figure out a way to get the information from this submission, this form submission, to appear at a different page. And so let's just have a look at our Cypress test. So you can see now that I've refreshed or restarted my app, that my Cypress test is further. So always make sure that you've reloaded or restarted your Node app. Okay, so the next part of this is to, and I want to get to a place where I can submit the name and see it on the page, and then we'll stop. Is to be able to, there might be one more thing. I've got to be able to find a way to get the information from that form. And for that, we need to install another package. And so let's have a quick research on what we need to do. Node form submission. We probably have a look at something like this. Let's have a look. That's probably a good resource. I really want. I don't really. I know what I want, but it's not coming up in my search. Let's have a look at what this says. I want to. Nope. Right, I'll just find it myself. Node express form data body parser. That's what I want. Okay, so what this package is going to do is allow me to extract data from the form data submission. And I want to have a way to use it, but I wish to give an example here. But let's just install it first and then move on. Save dev. Cool. So I've installed this package called Body Parser, and there's a few that do something similar. And I want to it's an example of how to set it up. Here we are somewhere here. Examples, yay. Okay, so first thing is we require it. So let's add that to our application. Const body parser. What else do I need to do? I have to do something like this. Okay. I only need form data. Cool. So as a result, I want to be able to now do something like in my post request. I want to be able to make sure I can console.log the request body. I think that's what it just says there, request body. Cool. So what I'm trying to make sure I do is I can extract the data that comes across in my request over here. So when my browser makes that form submission, I want with that data from the input field of the submit button, I want to be able to extract that on my application. So I'm going to kill my app and restart it because I've changed some stuff here. And let's see how far I get. So I'm going to refresh my page. And any console.log statements when you're running your app will happen in your terminal, in specifically the shell that's running your Node application. So you'll be able to debug by reading any logging statements that you put in. So you can log as much as you want and it'll pop out here. So let's have a look. I assume that's how you spell my name. And you can see here that my my console log statement has popped up, and you can see that my object here has the information from my form submission, which is useful. All right. So if I just log whatever's the property here, name, let's kill the server and restart it because I've changed that line. And go back and reload my page, ABC, and go back and have a look. You can see that I get my form data submission here, ABC. So whenever you want to get visibility over what data you're sending across in the request, as long as you've installed some middleware that can pass your request body, you'll be able to use it. So as a result, and now that I have access to that bit of data, I can pass it into my my view, and that's why we call it embedded JavaScript. So even though it looks like HTML here in these files, you can actually inject JavaScript into them. So rather than use it like this, let's get some documentation for this. Does this give me an example? Cool. Render variables in EJS to echo a single variable. We just use this notation. All right, so let's grab here and then do something like name. All right, where do we get name from? Well, I have to send it across. So here I'm going to have a look, and you can use render with a view file and then an object of property value pairs. So here I'll do something like name, and then here it's going to be request body name. So that's the property that I want to make available in my view, and this is the value that it should have. And because I've sent this across in my request, I have access to the form data in the request body, and I can extract it because I've added this line, these lines up here. So I send this across to my view, and when my view gets built, it builds it with the name value. And this is going to be stored here. Okay, so let's kill my app and run it again, and go back to localhost. Where are you? And say something like Alfred. Submit. Your name is Alfred. Hey. Let's go back to my tests and have a look. Oh, it needs an exclamation mark. So let's add that exclamation mark in. Go back to name and say exclamation mark. Cool. So that's a test-driven, a short test-driven demonstration of creating a web application using Express and using two simple route handlers to listen to different requests, get requests at the index and a post request at /name, and then executing some code. We're using embedded JavaScript, EJS, as our template engine to keep the separations of concerns, where all view logic should be in the views folder, and this file at the moment is responsible for our controllers. And we can send our data across into a view file just by passing in a second argument to the render method with whatever values you want available by property names. Cool. All right, so let's have a look as I was going through this. Any questions? Does the logging still appear if I inspect the page? Anything that is on the browser side will run. Remember, JavaScript is now operating back on your machine, not in the browser. So you can have JavaScript running in the browser and also on your machine. So as long as you're careful about where you're logging, they'll appear in the corresponding place. All right. So any console log statements that happen in this file will always be in your terminal shell. If how come you didn't have to kill the server and rerun it when you did that last test? Give me an example.
When you added the exclamation mark, THML.
So it's usually only this file, the application file that you need. If you change, you need to reload. Usually these files get fetched again. So it's not. Sometimes your browser will still cache it with stale copy. Yeah, so you can change usually the views as much as you want, but if you change your controllers, you have to reload your application. General question. If I saw a library to use and then realize after it's useless to me, how do I uninstall it and remove it from dev dependencies? Either use npm to uninstall it, or just remove it from this line, just like that, boom, gone, and then npm install. So this is the source of truth. Your package, well, package.lock is a source of truth. This one will tell you it uses this to figure out. So if you remove anything from here, just then reinstall it, it'll be fine. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to upload this for everyone, and what I want you to do is just walk your way through this and recreate it. It holds in here a few key things. There's probably a lot that's new, as I expect, recreate this yourselves. Follow this recording and And then this afternoon, we can have a Q&A as well after the stand-ups and can troubleshoot anything that's happened. So this will demonstrate making a GET request, making a POST request, and extracting data from form data from the request. And those are some key things. The next thing we'll have a look at together using sessions, but I really want to dig into what these requests are, the request response cycle, tomorrow morning, and have a look at the actual text of a request and response. So that's what we're going to do. So for now, you can either have a quick break for lunch or start yourselves on having a look at Express. If I want to upload this and send you it, it might take 15 minutes to upload. So you can have a look at it. But the first thing I want everyone to do is just recreate this example. All right. Any questions for me? Anything that you noted down or you're interested in that you want me to chat about right now?
Oh yeah, Lewis's question.
Oh yeah, Lewis, remind me what the question was.
Sorry, I was just looking for the board to write it on. It was like what is the difference between server-side rendering and client-side rendering? Like, why is one better, and when do you use either?
Cool. One's not necessarily better than the other. All right. Let's have a look at this diagram again. So a couple of things, I guess. One is client-side rendering relies on the fact that you need a bunch of JavaScript to run on your browser, right? You can't have client-side rendering without JavaScript. So you could imagine a case where if you disable all JavaScript, server-side rendering is literally your only option. Right? If you want to lower load time, then server-side rendering is better, right? Because for client-side rendering, you need to load all of the JavaScript before you can do anything with it, and then it has to run. We've done a lot of client-side rendering, but using React as a JavaScript library. So that's one of the main differences. Is one, you have to wait for JavaScript to load and then run to be able to see anything on the page. Server-side rendering, on the other hand, can take advantage of all the infrastructure that a big company can have to expend on server farms. So it can speed up the ability to process lots of requests and render complex sort of responses and send them back to the browser. And you might also want to think about sort of load time. So sometimes what usually happens is you get server-side rendering for like the fundamental parts of the page that are quick to come back to a client, and then there'll be additional client-side rendering. There's usually a mix of both. In low internet places, or if your bandwidth is pretty thin, then you want to rely more on server-side rendering and just deliver simple text back to any client. Client-side rendering is usually you use a lot more bandwidth to install or download all of the JavaScript and do things. But also, on the other hand, delivers a rich interactive experience. So there are pros and cons to both, and usually people do a mixture of both. I think that's probably as deep of an answer I want to get into at the moment. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks.
Good question. Other thoughts and questions? Cool. All right. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then switch off the Zoom session so I can get the video and upload it. So break for lunch early if you want, or play around with Express, and then I'll try and get this uploaded. And then let's reconvene at 2:20 with in peer groups, and we use the same peer groups for the last 2 weeks. Let's chat then. Yeah. Cool. All right. Bye, folks.